So is there any situation in which abortion would be justifiable?
Yeah, so before I could answer that question, I first need to kind of explain what the pro-life position is. The pro-life position is that it is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. And so you could put it in the form of a syllogism for those who are logically inclined. All acts that intentionally kill an innocent human being are wrong. Premise two, abortion is an act which intentionally kills an innocent human being. Premise, or the conclusion would be that abortion is wrong. So if both of those premises are true, then that means that any situation in which we kill an innocent human being and intentionally kill an innocent human being would be wrong. So that means that any situation regarding the woman's socioeconomic status, things like she wants to continue school, she's afraid she might have to cut her hours at work. Her boyfriend or husband has threatened to leave her. All of these situations are not situations which would justify killing an unborn child. And of course, this is all contingent on the unborn, the embryo slash fetus being a full-fledged human being. And that's an argument that pro-life people make. And so just because of the question, I'm kind of assuming that the unborn is a full human being. I can obviously defend that, but just for the purpose of this question, I'm assuming that so that I can answer the question specifically. So socioeconomic reasons, things like overpopulation wouldn't justify it because we can't kill people outside the womb for these reasons. So we also can't kill someone inside the womb. And of course, there are a lot of resources available for an abortion-minded woman who needs some financial assistance. There are a lot of pregnancy care centers that can help with that. But then, of course, you have the more difficult cases, rape being one that is often brought up. But again, if it's wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being, then we can't justify an abortion in the case of rape. Now, that doesn't mean that we lack compassion for the woman who is raped. Obviously, she's gone through a very traumatic situation, and she needs to be referred for proper counseling. In fact, Warren Hearn, a late-term abortionist, has written a book called Abortion Practice, which is one of the most widely used textbooks on doing abortions. And in that textbook, he even says that a woman will not find healing after a rape in the abortionist's office. Now, of course, he would say that you need to do the abortion because Warren Hearn thinks that just any reason a woman wants to not be pregnant is a medically indicated abortion. I think he's obviously wrong about that, but he's also honest about, having an abortion is not going to help this woman. She needs to be referred to for proper counseling. So if the unborn is a full human being, we can't justify killing them, even though there's a very difficult situation going on. That's not a lack of compassion for the woman. It's just an unwillingness to commit murder of the unborn human being. And so regarding are there any situations in which abortion would be justifiable, I would say that if the pregnancy becomes life-threatening, abortion is permissible with a few caveats. And we can justify this a couple of ways. Number one, there's the situation of triage. If two patients are mortally wounded and you can only save one, you save the patient that has the greater chance of survival. Because if you try to save the one who is injured more severely, you might end up losing both. So in this case, if the mother dies, both the embryo and the mother will die. But if you save the mother's life, the embryo might still die. And so you have a situation here where if you try to preserve the life of the embryo, you'll end up losing them both. But if you try to preserve the life of the mother, then you can at least save one life. You don't have to lose them both. Now, we also have to remember, though, that a good end does not justify a bad means. We can't commit murder even if it's for a good purpose. Like when I talked about the situation of rape, we can't justify killing someone because of the difficult situation. So there have to be a few caveats to this. That a doctor can act in such a way as to preserve the woman's life, as long as the death of the embryo or fetus is not intended, but is merely foreseen. An example might be in an ectopic pregnancy. You can give the woman a drug to kill the embryo. It'll detach from her fallopian tube, and then the embryo will die. Well, that's a direct form of killing, so that would actually not be ethically permissible for a doctor to do, to give to the woman. because in that case you're intending the death of the embryo to save the mother's life. So you can act in such a way that the death of the embryo is foreseen but not intended. For example, you can use a salpingectomy, in which you actually remove a portion of the woman's fallopian tube. That is not a situation in which you're intending the death of the embryo. You're intending to save the woman's life. But the death of the embryo is foreseen by the action of removing the fallopian tube. So the death of the embryo is foreseen, but it's not intended. And secondly, you can't act in such a way as to directly kill the embryo. And so, again, removing the fallopian tube, or the portion of the fallopian tube that's the offending portion, is not directly killing. The embryo will die as a result of the doctor's actions, but it won't die as a direct result of the actions. It dies indirectly by the fact that you're removing the fallopian tube and removing the embryo from that environment in which it can survive. But again, you're working to preserve the life of the mother while still treating the embryo as a second patient. You're still respecting the life and dignity of the embryo by trying to work in such a way as to ethically preserve the life of the woman. And so the later the pregnancy goes on, though, the more difficult it would be to justify that, because once the fetus becomes viable, then you can't just kill the fetus to save the woman's life. What you would actually do is you would deliver the fetus in that case. And not only is that quicker, because you'd have to remove it by C-section. That's about a 30-minute operation, whereas a late-term abortion is a 2-day operation. So it's faster just to deliver the child, but it's also safer for the woman in that case too. So it's kind of a win-win. And plus, if it's a wanted pregnancy, she's going to want the child anyway. So you wouldn't want to act in such a way that's going to result in the fetus's death. You want to deliver the child and then work to preserve its life and keep it alive if you can. So a little bit of an in-depth explanation there, but it does require a little bit of explanation. So yeah, so then with those explanations in mind, the basic principle is a doctor can act to save the woman's life in such a way that the death of the fetus is not directly caused by the doctor, and the death is foreseen but not intended by the doctor.
Makes sense. Now, to take this one step further, people bring up a lot of extreme situations here. Most of these examples are ridiculous, and you may never see anything like this. Before we go on to that, though, Mikhail has a follow-up here.
Follow-up question.
Do situations exist in practice where abortion is the only option to save the mother's life, and where the embryo cannot be saved by a C-section and an incubator?
Well, I mean, I'm not aware of any, but again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't really foresee every possible situation. All I can do is, because I study bioethics, and so I can speak to the ethics and the philosophy of the situation. But as for every single situation a woman might find herself in, I don't really know all of them. I do know quite a few. Like, there's a situation called preeclampsia, which can be dangerous, but it's also possible to pull the woman through alive. So an abortion is not ever necessary to resolve preeclampsia. And so there are other situations in which you can apply these philosophical and ethical principles too, and that would be up to the doctor, because the doctor is much more qualified than I am just to say which situations would require to act in such a way that the embryo or the fetus will die. But being that I've studied the philosophy and ethics, I can speak to that portion of it. But I'm not educated as a doctor, so I couldn't give you an exhaustive list of all the situations that could arise.
And that kind of leads into my follow-up question, which although it's an extreme example,
actually, something comes to mind real quick. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, just to kind of follow up on that too, because something kind of popped into my head. In that, if there is a situation where abortion is the only option and the embryo can't be saved by C-section and an incubator, and it can't be saved without directly or intentionally killing it, I would say that it would probably be, it might be unethical, but I don't think a woman should be legally required to give up her life in that situation. So she may be doing something morally wrong by opting to have an abortion, but I'm not sure we should legally prevent her from doing so. So that's kind of what I would say there is that I don't know if it should necessarily prevent her in that case because the situation is so dire. But in most situations, we can't justify killing the embryo or fetus to resolve the situation.
That's a good point, and that does kind of lead into what I was going to say. Let's say that the father, in a given case, doesn't want to have the child and is going to give her the option of forcing her to have the abortion, or he's going to take her life.
Hmm.
In a scenario like that, um, what is the ethical outcome of that sort of thing? Should she have the abortion or not?
Yeah, see, and again, something like this might be better for a pro-life counselor to respond because this is kind of a situation of domestic abuse, and so
Right.
I don't know what the best way is to resolve domestic abuse. That would be something for a licensed counselor, and I would prefer a pro-life licensed counselor because then I know that that counselor will be taking the fetus's life into account too. So I would say just ethically, no, it would not be permissible to get the abortion. But there, I'm sure there must be something she would be able to do in order to get herself out of that situation, even if she has to lie that she will get the abortion and then go to the authorities to explain the situation, or however the counselor would suggest resolving that situation. Because just like with the rape example, the right thing to do is rarely the easy thing to do. And if the embryo or fetus is really a full-fledged human being, as I really don't think there's any good reason to deny, then we need to make sure we take steps to preserve it. And so if she had for example, a toddler, and her boyfriend or husband gave her a gun and basically said, look, I'm going to kill you if you don't kill your toddler, would we think it would be permissible then for her to kill her toddler? Well, I should think even in that situation, no, it would not be permissible. I mean, as difficult as it is, we would kind of expect a mother to protect her own child with her life. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily, this kind of situation is just difficult all around. And so, if she were to go through with killing the toddler, I don't think the law would necessarily prosecute her for that, because it does take the circumstances surrounding the act into account. So the law would probably figure that she killed the toddler under duress because her own life was being threatened. So whether or not we think it was morally wrong to kill the toddler in that situation, I don't think a judge would actually prosecute her for doing so, because they would probably take the fact that she was coerced into it by threat of losing her own life into account.
I think that's excellent. That's what I like hearing from you on these situations, is you always take it and put it in a practical sense. So I can appreciate that you're able to do that on these scenarios. It makes it more relatable, and I think it's just the most caring way to approach it.
Well, I learned from the best in the movement. If it weren't for guys like Scott Glusendorf and Frank Beckwith and Christopher Kaiser, I wouldn't be as knowledgeable as I am on the philosophy or ethics of abortion. So, as they say, I stand on the shoulders of giants.